Back in the first part of this two-part video, we went through the exercise of ranking all 44 of the original Activision titles released for the Atari VCS, the original Atari 2600. And we made it through half of them, 22 of the 44. Here's what the tier looks like so far. Now, in case you clicked on this one and have not yet seen part one, I'll throw a link to that up there in the corner if you'd like to get caught up. But in this video, we're going to complete the exercise. All 44 Atari 2600 VCS games from Activision will be fully ranked on our tier, and we're going to get after it right after this. This video supported in part by...
Playing VR, I tend to sweat. It gives me an edge. So King of Nerds happens to give me an edge too. Let King of Nerds give you the edge. Bye, King of Nerds.
Hey there, welcome back to GenXGrownUp. I'm John, and I am a GenXGrownUp. Thank you so much for coming back to watch part two of this, if in fact that's what you did, or if you're just watching this one, thank you for that as well. Now, this is a purely subjective exercise, and I knew at the outset that I was going to make a lot of people unhappy because their game rankings don't match my game rankings. And that's fine. Now, I said this back in part one, and I'll say it again here, it bears repeating. I'm trying very hard to not rate these based on my current feelings and nostalgia for the games, but how would I feel as a 10-year-old me spending 30 bucks of my allowance, coming home and plugging this game in my console? How would that 10-year-old Johnny rate the game? That's what I'm trying to limit myself to. So let's get back to the list and resume where we left off. And it's a goodie, Keystone Kapers. Wow, what a great one to start this second part on. This game looks simple, but there's so much more to it. The fluidity of the cop's movement I always thought was amazing. He doesn't just spring from the floor to the ceiling, he has an arc in his jump that you can use as a mechanic in how you jump elements that you have to dodge. There's a lot of strategy that's not immediately apparent. There's that risk reward of the elevator. And this is a game that gets progressively more difficult, but not unfairly difficult. They add more complex enemies that you have to dodge, and that burglar always seems to be a little bit farther ahead than he was last time when you start a level. Keystone Kapers is going to get us going in this second part with a solid A on our tier list. From the highs to the lows, we're moving on now to Kung Fu Master. Like Double Dragon before it, this is the kind of game that just should not have been ported to the VCS with the current technology and capabilities. And if you ended up buying this game based on the screenshots on the box, you weren't lied to. It turns out though, beauty and graphics is about all this game has going for it. It's style with no substance. Kind of like Double Dragon before it, but Double Dragon was worse actually, I guess. But this does a semi-respectable job of reproducing the music and sprites from Kung Fu Master, but what's missing is any of the interesting gameplay. You can't jump and kick at the same time, you can't tell when you're being grabbed, guys are unfair, you can't tell if you're... There's nothing redeeming about this game. If you try to play it, you're going to play it for about 3 minutes and you're going to turn it off. Johnny would not have been happy. This is an F on our tier list. Next up is an early in the life of Activision, kind of space shootery sort of thing called Laser Blast. This, unfortunately, is another one-trick pony. Once you figure out how to shoot the little bases at the bottom and how to dodge their lasers, you've played the whole game. It doesn't get any more interesting than that. It gets a little faster, but like there's no overarching thing you're trying to accomplish, like waves or levels. It's just kind of the same thing over and over. I will give a special shout out. I do like when you get shot that you can kamikaze your little UFO and crash into one of the ships. So you get that kind of, haha, got you back sort of thing. But beyond that, there's not a lot in this game that makes me smile. So it's going to be a D on my tier list. We're going to keep shooting stuff with the next one, and that's Megamania. This is a title that put the Space Invaders shooting genre on its ear with the variety of enemies and patterns and methods to shoot, guided bullets or not guided bullets. The more you played, the more you would find strategy in how to fight the different attack patterns and waves, and the way that your power kind of drains down. By the way, your ship looks a little bit like an Enterprise. That didn't hurt. This is an infinitely replayable shooter. If you liked Space Invaders and you didn't play Megamania, Megamania should be on your replay list right up there with Space Invaders because it's everything that had and more. So this is without a doubt superb, top of the list on our tier. Up next is Activision's take on the Three Little Pigs fairy tale with Oink. And I guess in this point of the story, we're up to the House of Brick because the wolf keeps trying to blow down the wall. Looks like he has a tongue he's blowing with, like he's an anteater. Doesn't matter. The wolf is trying to destroy the wall. You're picking up bricks and dropping them into the wall to try to repair it. Reminds me a little bit of the Zookeeper mechanic where you had to keep the wall intact so the animals didn't escape. For me, because of what's accomplished here with the sprites and the way the fairy tale is kind of brought to life, and plus that building, destruction, construction mechanic, Oink rates a solid B on the tier. If you're keeping up with the alphabet, you're probably just leaned forward in your chair a little bit because you know I finally got to Pitfall. And yes, I agree. Pitfall is an amazing accomplishment. It is a crowning achievement on the Atari VCS. Pitfall is the pioneer of the modern adventure game. It's infinitely replayable, it's a graphical triumph, it's actually a predictable map that you can map out, and if you move underground, you can move 3 screens instead of 1, the way that's mathematically kind of fractal calculated inside of the limited memory of the VCS and its cartridges. I don't know what more I need to or have to say about Pitfall other than to say it absolutely rates an S, superb, on the top of my tier. If it didn't, you should disregard my tier because that's where Pitfall belongs. However, its sequel, Pitfall 2, is up next. And if I say that with some caution, it's not because it's not good, it's because it's not Pitfall. It seems like a no-brainer. Pitfall 2 expanded on everything in the original in plenty of ways, but it didn't innovate like Pitfall 1 did. I mean, if there was no Pitfall 1, Pitfall 2 would never have happened. I remember at the time the extra accomplishment of getting all that music in the game was a big deal, but you better really like it because it's loud and you can't turn it down and it's louder than most of the sound effects. It gets on my nerves. I'm not dinging the game for that. In fact, Pitfall 2, despite not being the innovator that Pitfall 1 was, I'm ranking it a solid A on the tier. That's not disrespectful, it's just not as superb as the original. Incidentally, did you remember to brush your teeth this morning? Well, if you didn't, let's go play some Plaque Attack instead. This is a cute little game where you pilot a tube of toothpaste and you have to protect the teeth in this mouth from food that's attacking. Now, interestingly, even fruit is attacking the teeth. The cherries and strawberries aren't very good for your teeth. That doesn't matter, it's just different enemies. But all the food and fruit stuff is well rendered, easy to recognize. And in some ways, I even compare this to a mashup of Megamania and Missile Command because you have the different enemies and different attack patterns, but you're protecting bases, which are in this case, the teeth that can be destroyed. So if you like either of those two games, you're probably going to like Plaque Attack. I certainly do, and it rates a solid A on my rating tier. Up next is Pressure Cooker, a game that's just as comfortable on the VCS as it would be as a mobile game today. This is an early example of one of those conveyor belt multitasking management games. You're this little short order cook making hamburgers. The different components for the hamburger are thrown at you. You need to catch them and put them on the correct burger, match the orders based on the chart at the bottom. Once you get a completed burger, you take it to this chute to drop in to deliver to whoever ordered it. And coming off a string of A-rated games, this is going to feel like a dig, but it's not when I say Pressure Cooker is a solid B on my ranking tier. Now, if you liked that Megamania Missile Command combo that was Plaque Attack, you're going to like this one, Private Eye. I consider this to be a mashup of several kinds of games. It's kind of like the Superman for the 2600, it's kind of like Pitfall, it's got elements of E.T. The premise is you're a private eye trying to solve multiple cases. You have your little car that you drive around this map in this city that reminds me very kind of Pitfall-y and Superman, as I said, and you're picking up elements that you have to take back and deliver from where they were stolen. For example, you might get the money and take it back to the bank. You might get the comb and take it back to the barber shop. And the different game variations that you select are actually different missions that have different things you need to accomplish. So each time you play, it can be a different game. It has a feeling of exploration that are missing from a lot of Atari VCS games. So Private Eye ranks right up there as an A on my tier. You ready for another respectable arcade port? Too bad, it's time for Rampage instead. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is almost an F game. I'm not gonna try to pretend and make you guess. Some games just shouldn't be here at all. This is a valiant effort. There's some interesting stuff going on in the background with kind of the helicopters and the skyline, but the foreground stuff, the sprites are abysmal. The buildings are they're like combat blocky. There's nothing interesting there. And there's no excitement to the gameplay that you would get from Rampage. Brr, this is a D. I would give it an F, but it's a little better than the other ones I've given an F, so that's the best I can do for Rampage. Don't bother. Now we move on to the second game that had a sequel on our list, and we start with the original, River Raid. Somehow, some VCS games were able to absolutely capture what was trying to be conveyed in the game, and River Raid is one of those. You get that feeling you're flying down this valley and you're shooting down these planes and these ships, and you have to gather fuel and shoot the bridges, and sometimes jets fly across. I'm gonna guess the map is not random, but it feels so varied that you're never really bored with the map. There are new kind of nooks and crannies and avenues to do, and new placements of the enemies, so you have to decide when to speed up and when to slow down. Plus, I always love the mechanic of getting fuel out of a fuel tank and then shooting it at the last possible second, so you not only get gas, but you also get points. There's a lot to love in River Raid, so replayable. It is a solid A on my tier. And now to its sequel, River Raid 2, that just came out a couple of years later. They tried to iterate on everything that was in River Raid, but it felt unnecessary to me. They added some cool variable stuff like different altitudes. Think Zaxxon, like how high you are, it kind of tells you what you can shoot, what's on the ground, or what's in the air. That's interesting, but they don't really pull it off here because you have limited controls with the up, down, left, right, and lower is also slower, and higher is also faster. Sometimes you do get to a part of the game that looks like the original River Raid, but half the screen is obscured with this stats block, so you have even less immersion in the game. It doesn't make this a bad sequel, it just is nowhere near as good as the original, so River Raid 2, it gets a C. Okay, now we're done with arcade ports. Kind of, but we do have a game that was inspired by an arcade game, Robot Tank. This is very clearly Activision's answer to Atari's Battlezone. And I love when Activision just crams it down the throat of Atari and says, is that your Battlezone? Is that the best you can do? We'll do ours, and look what we did. They added much more to this game and made it less of a wireframe, can I turn left and right and blow up the tanks and UFOs, and much more of a strategic simulation where your tank has different systems you need to manage. If you get hit, you might only lose some systems and not the other. I really like how the view out of your tank kind of bobs up and down like you're driving over hilly terrain. That adds a lot. And then when you do get destroyed, your screen goes haywire. I've never seen another game on VCS do this successfully, to simulate static and break up in a screen. I think they did a great job with Robot Tank. Not the best game in the Activision repertoire, but it is respectable and well replayable, so I'm going to give it a solid B on my tier ranking. Up next is SeaQuest, a game that I consider to be a respectable run-of-the-mill underwater shooter. You're a submarine trying to rescue divers and fighting off other subs, and I guess shooting fish for some reason as well, because the fish can hurt your submarine. But your sub has a limited number of air, so sometimes you have to come to the top and get more oxygen. It's fine, but nothing to write home about. I'm going to give it right in the middle of the road. SeaQuest ranks a C. Up next alphabetically is skiing, and this is yet another example of Activision proving they can do slalom skiing better than Atari did in a couple of versions on the Street Racer cartridge. Look, it's top down, which always seemed like an odd way to play skiing to me. I want to move forward and move up, move down the hill, and I feel like I'm coming up the hill. Anyway, all you're doing is gradually adjusting your skis left and right to go through the slalom until you get to the bottom, and then you have a time score. Yay, it's okay, nothing great, and in hindsight, it felt more like a demo of what a skiing game could be than a really polished skiing game. I'm putting it with the rest of the D's on my tier. And speaking of a slalom game where you go left and right through some gates, how about Skyjinx, which is almost the exact same thing, but it's what I wanted in the skiing game. I am going forward on the screen from bottom to top, but this time it's a plane, and I'm just going left and right around these pylons. You need to go to the right of the red pylons, left of the blue pylons, and try not to crash or run into any of the stuff that's in your way. It still doesn't have Boo-Koodle's replayability, but it's a better skiing game than skiing was, so I'm going to give this one right in the middle of the road, a C on our tier. This next one is by far the most ambitious game ever released by Activision on the VCS, and that's Space Shuttle. I would almost argue this is less of a game and more of a strategic simulation. How about strategic? It's a simulation, certainly. And you would think being a simulation, it would be super immersive, and it kind of is halfway. It allows you to kind of sit in the cockpit of a space shuttle during a launch, but you kind of have to click all the buttons, and then you sit back and do nothing for a while. You do use levers like black and white color switch and difficulty to do more things on your control panel, which is cool, and then you launch, and you sit there and just watch it launch for a while. And then you get out in orbit, and you kind of sit there and watch it in orbit for a while. Space Shuttle is an impressive accomplishment, but it falls short of being a really, really good game, but it is interesting and worth a play if you missed out on it, if for no other reason than to look back kind of at what Activision was trying to do, thinking outside of the box that had not been done on the VCS. So I'm going to drop Space Shuttle right in the middle with a C. We're almost to the end. We're now up to Spider Fighter. And if previous games were Activision trying to stick it to Atari, I've always got the feeling that Spider Fighter was Activision trying to stick it to a Magic. If you look at this, I guess not space shooter, bug shooter game, whatever it is, it reminds me a lot of Demon Attack, both in the design of the sprites and in the frenetic pace of the game. The object here is to fight off the spiders that are trying to get over to the right-hand side of the screen to grab your fruit and steal it. When you run out of ships or you run out of fruit, your game is over, but just keep shooting and you're going to do pretty good. And if Activision was in fact trying to match a Magic success here, I think they did a fair job. I'm going to give Spider Fighter a B. All right, time to yeehaw out to the Wild West with Stampede. This is a very early Activision game. And one that, again, little 10-year-old Johnny would not have been stoked about. It was impressive for the day. It was definitely an early Activision title looking to see what could they do that's more innovative with the VCS, and in that they succeeded. But really all you do is move up and down. You're trying to not let any of the calves get past you. You have to dodge these little steer skulls that are kind of dropped in your way, all the while not letting too many of these calves by. And if you do, game over. And like several of the early titles, it's just kind of a one-trick pony. Ha, get it? Pony, because you're riding a horse. I give it a D. Unapologetically, D. Okay, just 2 left, and we're going out with a bang. This next one up, one of my favorites, Star Master. Now, it was difficult for me to not put my own injected nostalgia into this, but I'm trying really hard. But when you consider Star Master was 1982, and it did pretty much everything Star Raiders did without a special controller, without the backing of Atari, and it gave you that immersive feel of being an outer space combat pilot going from sector to sector on the map, fighting these Klingon-looking enemies, docking with a star base. It's all there, and they accomplish it so well that it's such an immersive game. I feel like I've said immersive 3 times, but it deserves more. Immersive. There's 2 more. Star Master is a great game that holds up so well today. This is our final superb on our tier list. And now we move on to the very last one on our list alphabetically. This is number 44. T is for tennis. And this little tennis game is surprisingly good. Look, it was released in 1981. But even later, when Atari did their real sports tennis, it wasn't much better. You can play single player, you can play multiplayer, it's fun with a friend, it's fun when you're by yourself, and it has all the rules and scoring are accurate for tennis, so there's not a lot to be mad about. We're going to round up this list by putting tennis squarely in the middle of our tier with a C. Whew, okay, shake it out, we made it. Together we have run through all 44 Activision games released for the original Atari VCS, our beloved 2600. I certainly enjoyed putting this together. I hope you dug it too. Please let me know in the comments while you're also letting me know which games I put in the wrong tier. I'm open to that as well. I'm going to throw some links from my shoulders here and here to some other Atari videos I've done recently. I sure hope you found something to enjoy in this video, and I cannot wait to talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.